Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast, where we explore practical mental models to help construction leaders build businesses that are hard to compete with. They have better leadership, stronger teams, clearer strategy, and they get better results. I'm your host, Bradley Hartmann. So there's this one 3-word phrase that I've been thinking a lot about because I use it. I say it to myself. I will often say it to my colleagues. I'll say it to clients. And I've come to realize that it is largely useless. And I'll explain why. And these 3 words are set clear expectations. When you hear it and someone says, well, I think we've got to set some clear expectations. Well, yeah, of course. It's like so obvious it's useless. The question is how? How do we set clear expectations when different people around us, we have different experiences and different assumptions, and what might be a ridiculously obvious expectation for someone might be completely fascinating in the fact that they've never even considered it to someone else? More simply said, what does clear actually look like? And how do we communicate these boundaries? How do we reinforce them? And what happens when everyone thinks they understand the expectations until they learn that they actually violated them? So in today's episode, my friend, I'm going to share a lesson about leadership from an unlikely place. It was me driving on the roads of Puerto Rico that have no lines. And why one of the costliest things a leader can do is leave people guessing about where the lines are. Let's dive in. So recently, my family and I spent a week and a half in Puerto Rico. The first half was around this tournament for 14U baseball. That's correct. Apparently, we looked around the state of Texas and said, can we go someplace where it's hotter and more expensive? And we said, aha, I got it. Let's go to Puerto Rico. So that's what we did. And despite the heat and despite the cost, we had a wonderful time. It was great. The kids did well. We had a lot of fun. Glad we did it. However, to this day, I continue to have dreams, actually nightmares, about something that didn't happen. And it was around me driving. Some people down there drive way too fast. Meanwhile, some other people on the exact same roads drive way too slow. And oftentimes, there's no lines at all. There's no lines on the boundaries. Hanging off the shoulder of the road, there's no line in the middle. In Puerto Rico, apparently they're saving loads of money by putting no signage anywhere, so you don't know where the hell you're going, or accidentally, when you chose to drive down a one-way road, going the wrong direction. The over-under on how many real accidents I somehow didn't get in has to be 7.5. But the dangerous nature of this situation came from what was obviously different interpretations of how we drive on unmarked roads on an island. So I return home and I have this giant pile of Wall Street journals to go through. Yes, I still get them delivered to my driveway. If you want to make fun of me for that, I'll fully own it, but I still like having the paper. I really do. Anyway, one of the regular writers, Ben Cohen, talks about this unsung invention of a line and how in the 1950s, around the time Jonas Salk cracked the polio vaccine, a metallurgist named John V.N. Dorr became the champion of a different lifesaver, a white line on the right side of the road. For years, Dorr told anyone who would listen, and everyone who wouldn't, about his simple way of making highways safer. A line on the side of the road, he argued, would give drivers somewhere to aim their eyes at night other than oncoming headlights. It was cheap and incredibly effective. Over time, his revolutionary stripe of paint would guide drivers across the planet. So, turns out this guy, John V.N. Nostrand, for you Seinfeld fans, you will be happy to learn that the V.N. stands for Van Nostrand. That's right, John Van Nostrand Dorr. Quite the name. Anyway, he really started pushing this when he was in his 80s. Turns out he was a terrible driver. Apparently, he almost drove off the road and killed everyone in the car when he was taking his granddaughter to the hospital to have her first child. Well, he comes to believe this line can save lives, and he's pushing it. And like any great idea, this one also had a bunch of headwinds. People were fighting this. Actually, individual states were arguing the opposite, that anywhere there was a line, they should remove it. including, of course, the state of Ohio. When Doar began his campaign, the agency overseeing the safety of America's roads specifically warned against edge lines, fearing they would confuse drivers. "We have not found any locations," Ohio's highway director told him, "where we believe edge marking would yield sufficient value to warrant its extensive use." It would soon be used quite extensively in Ohio, which became a petri dish for Doar's line. To measure its value, the state ran a controlled experiment and determined which roads were striped or left unmarked by flipping a coin. The results were as unequivocal as heads or tails. Over the next year, the lined highways reported significantly fewer crashes and a 37% reduction in fatalities and injuries. So naturally, I cut out this article and I put it in an envelope and I sent it to the president of Puerto Rico. I'll keep you posted when I hear back. Now, as I was thinking about my Puerto Rican driving experience and lines on the road and learning about this guy, John Van Nostrand Doar, and how lines ended up on highways, in comes the August 14th edition of the Admired Leadership Field Notes. If you are not subscribed to this, I would strongly recommend it to a friend. It's wonderful. And the headline here was, "Unspoken expectations are the costliest thing a leader never says." And here's how it opens. Author Neil Strauss said it in 5 words, making obvious what is often hidden. Unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. Leaders hold expectations for process and performance. When those expectations remain unstated but are still used to evaluate team members, the people being judged can feel a genuine sense of injustice. And the reason this sense of injustice will abound is because we operate with different assumptions about what is common sense, what is obvious, about what is the correct way to behave in specific situations. Your mileage, as they say, will vary. And I had this happen just recently. We were talking to some executives about essentially how different parts of a sales team could work together better to upsell and cross-sell products to the same set of very loyal customers. And what we were talking about is, how do we keep someone else in the loop when they don't really need to be in the loop now? They just have to be aware of what's happening, right? And one executive said, "Hey, my guys over here, we're really passionate about closing the loop," right? And then we all kind of nodded and I said, "Well, if I may, what exactly does closing the loop mean to you?" And he said, "Oh, well, it's a circling back. It's following up, sharing some messages," right? And he went on this monologue that included lots of euphemisms and cliches. And we all, to some degree, know what he's saying. But this is not a process. This is not documented. It is not specific. And in breaking that down, this phrase, closing the loop, and being much more specific about certain stages of the customer journey, ultimately we got to some place where everyone was nodding their head saying, okay, if this is what closing the loop means, we probably do it about 20% of the time, and it's based on luck. Okay, now we can teach it, we can coach it, we can help hold people accountable. And this is another way of saying we've put lines on the edges of the road. Leaders often believe they are more transparent and explicit about their expectations than they objectively are. They also commonly overestimate how visible their intentions, priorities, and standards are to everyone else. I couldn't agree with this more, and I know that I am guilty as well. And what we try to do in our own organization, knowing there's only 6 of us, how do we get more consistent and articulate the boundaries and the way we expect to behave within our own team and certainly with customers? And I consistently come back to this acronym that explains how adults learn best, and it's VARK, V-A-R-K. And that is video, it is audio, it is reading and writing, and it's kinesthetic. So these are the different ways that we learn. And I'm a big fan of using these different medium to consistently come back to the same set of behaviors that are ultimately our priorities, our intentions, and represents the standards that we have in our organization. And hopefully these are high standards. So can I put this in brief little training videos during our onboarding? Can we do our own little private podcast, or can I build them into a podcast like this? And when I'm done, yes, it goes out to the universe, it goes out to you, but I also tag it and I send it to my own people saying, hey, this is what we need to work on, Reading and writing, can we put it in a book? We have a culture guide specific to our team, and it's a living document. We recently had to let someone go. We learned a few new things. So what are we doing? We're going back. We're going to update it. We're going to throw out the old ones, and we're going to print out a new edition and distribute it and talk about it, because these are the high standards. And then you have kinesthetic. What can we do to physically engage with this thing? And here you might have to be a little bit more creative, but ultimately these are the 4 ways that people learn: video, audio, reading and writing, and then kinesthetic, doing something involving your motor skills. So leveraging these different forms of medium to convey your messages increases the probability we will start to establish a shared language where everyone is nodding their heads and behaving in ways that are consistent with one another, not based on our assumptions and not questioning the intent. If this is not done, team members become resentful. They naturally view it as unfair to be evaluated against expectations that were never communicated. That resentment, once it takes hold, shows up as a lack of discretionary effort and a general withdrawal from the leader. The usual prescription for leaders is to communicate more and to, quote unquote, set clear expectations. But that's not easy as it sounds, because communication and understanding are not the same thing. The best leaders have learned that setting expectations isn't about issuing instructions. It's about drawing a clear line, early and often, between the decisions that belong to the team member and the ones that must follow a more scripted set of actions. When people know what is theirs to decide, they naturally seek out clarity for the steps they must follow on everything else. It's that line, because communication and understanding are not the same thing. I know for me, I find it much easier to communicate verbally in meetings that I lead, in writing that I'm constantly doing, and I'm thinking it's everywhere. It's got to be obvious. But that is completely different than working one-on-one or in a small team and have that shared understanding from a behavioral standpoint of what these words actually mean. So as you're moving forward and you hear these phrases that are bandied about all the time, like use good judgment, we need to communicate better, I want you to take ownership, hey, just keep me informed, we need to make the customer the priority, and I need you to be accountable. Right? These are all phrases we hear all the time. And if your team's anything like mine, if you were to say them, it's not like you would get a completely blank stare and they would have no idea what the hell you're talking about, like you're speaking Spanish to them. No, they have some understanding. The risk is their understanding is different than yours. So as we close out here, my friend, I'm going to give you a leadership test of sorts. This is something that you can do. Here's the question. Where on your team are people currently driving on a road without lines? And here's a hint. Anywhere where you were like me, driving in Puerto Rico, some people are driving fast, some people are driving slow, some people are driving in the middle of the road, some people have both tires hanging off the road, kicking up dust and rocks everywhere. If you find yourself repeatedly frustrated, that's a hint. That's a sign. Dive in there. Maybe the lines on the road aren't there. If you find yourself saying, why on earth do I have to repeat this over and over and over again? That's a sign. Maybe the lines on the road aren't there. The next time you're thinking that someone has no common sense, well, there is a variety of person on the planet that falls into this category. However, there are others, a lot more people that are around you that just haven't been made explicitly aware of what you believe to be common sense that might be different for them. So before blaming another driver, ask this: have I actually painted the line on the road? Because lines are boundaries, and boundaries are essential to getting along with other people in ways that don't want to make us put our head through a plate glass window. Lines are all about expectations, and when they're clear, it allows everyone to drive faster. It allows everyone to move forward in the direction of your goals quicker and more safely. So before you get frustrated the next time you say somebody crossed the line, might be a good idea to look down and see if one was painted on the ground in the first place. All right, friend, that's all I've got. Look in the show notes. I will have links to Ben Cohen's story, Unsung Invention, a line about my man, John Van Nostrandor, and of course, the Admired Leadership edition of Field Notes from August 14th. Both of these would be valuable. Share them with your team. And as always, good luck on the road to better leadership. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.